morning, everybody. I'm Louis Glenns, president of Regis. Welcome you to our coffee and chemistry talk. We have plenty of talks, and if you look at our website, they're even on the YouTube. I have a little promotion of our company. We're a company that takes molecules from development up through the clinic to commercial, and we do all the associated analytical validation and purity work along with that for your filing documents for the drug master file. We have really good fortune to have Mike Anisfeld here as a speaker. Mike has 35 years in the pharmaceutical industry in production, quality, and technical transfer. Mike was educated in the UK and is actually a qualified person in the UK. So some of our products are released in Europe by QPs, and Mike is one of those persons. For the last 15 years, Mike's advised Regis, and he's no small part of us having 043s on our last 3 inspections. We're very happy about that. I want to make this a productive day. Mike's going to talk for an hour on data integrity. This is the #1 way that companies find themselves in FDA warning letters. And actually, interesting in your presentation, you had some things where car companies have gotten some data integrity issues.
Oh, you wait.
You wait. Let's welcome up Mike Anisfeld.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody. Slight qualification. I am a QP in Europe, but because I'm resident here in the States, I'm on a reserve list in Europe. The day I move back and tell them I'm officially back in England, I become a full QP again. So that's the bizarrity of the European regulations. Today we're going to talk about data integrity, which is becoming the #1 topic in FDA inspections. 3 weeks ago, I was in Seoul, Korea, with a client who's going through his 4th FDA inspection, so we expected no problem. 1 inspector for 5 days, 3 days spent doing data integrity, 2 days looking at the quality systems. Never got in production, never got into warehousing, never got into validation. It was all data integrity. So that's the move of FDA these days. We're living in a world of lots and lots of data and many words, and you hear about this all the time, big data, data integrity, and what does it really mean to us, and what does it really mean to society in general? So it's how do you access the data, who can change the data, how do you maintain the data? It's all part of that system. Just a bit of history, some GMP trends. In the 1980s, we had basic GMPs. You know, the regulations came out and everybody was trying to get to grips with it. In the 1990s, we had the Part 11 computer controls. If you remember Y2K, anybody remember the panic of Y2K? Your bank accounts will disappear on midnight on December 31st, 1999. Some of you may be too young to remember that. Then we had the aughts, as they say, the 2000s, where we got into quality systems, out of specs, CAPAs, and trending, which was new to many, many companies. And now the theme of this last few years is data integrity. And as I said, it really is becoming the real focus of many inspections. Not just FDA. The British, the Korean, not the Koreans, the Swedish, other European countries are also very, very concerned about this. So it's becoming a global issue of really big proportions. Some quality management principles and where does this all fit together. If you read ICH, International Conference on Harmonization, they have guidelines which are now in effect basically worldwide. Everybody follows them. If you read ICH Q10, they talk about quality management systems, which involves the patient. What are we doing to impact the patient positively, I hope? How do we design our drugs and our APIs towards the patient? We talk about leadership and management responsibilities. Lewis's job here at Regis is to give the people the money, the finances, the time to get the job done. Then he delegates the quality aspects to Dan, he delegates the production aspects to somebody else, but management is the top key issue. The process, what is the process we're in? What are we trying to make? How are we trying to do it? And how do we design it that it's validated and foolproof? And then where is the evidence of that? Where is the data of that? And I've highlighted that because that's going to be the subject of today's discussion. Then we have CAPA, corrective action, preventive action. What do we do if things go wrong? Because none of you came to work this morning saying, I'm going to mess up. Things just happen. Well, you may do. I don't know. I hate the company. I'm going to really mess it up. But none of us really do that. But things happen. So what do we do? How do we correct? And then finally, we get into FDA's big one these days, which is their key to getting into data integrity, their key to getting into quality systems. They first go for the annual product reviews. So it's we give them the information and they can rip us apart. But that's the quality management principles. And you have to realize it's not just pharmaceuticals. I don't know if anybody's followed the news in the last few weeks about the scandal in Japan. Kobe steel. Anybody heard of Kobe steel? It hit NPR this morning for the first time. Kobe steel makes the steel for automobile industry, and about 80% of all cars made in Japan use Kobe steel. Well, it turns out that they've been fudging all their data about the steel strength. And now there's a huge scandal which could impact every car made in Japan over the last 10 years and could be massive, massive recalls. We're not sure yet what's going to be happening. So it's not just the pharmaceutical industry we worry about. It impacts everybody. It impacts everything. Mitsubishi Motors, another Japanese company, manipulated data to make the fuel economy for some of its cars look better. Hey, if Volkswagen does it, why don't we? I mean, hey, let's join the club. This one blows my mind. The US Air Force managed to lose 100,000 records in its database because they didn't do any backups. The US Air Force didn't do backups, lost 100,000 records? Doesn't that tell you something about government? Or specifically, where was their QA people to make sure the system worked properly? So it's not just pharmaceuticals. This is an old one from pharmaceuticals from 2003, where this company called Pan Pharmaceuticals had to recall every product on the market because they had systematic and deliberate manipulation of their quality control test data. If they couldn't do the test, just write a number. Makes no difference. Nobody's going to check. Well, guess what? They got caught out and caught out royalty. There was a period in 2004 that you could not get a vitamin product from Walgreens because everyone had been made in Australia and shipped over here, and it was a worldwide recall. The company went out of business about 6 months later. So it's everything. Now, it is a global concern. You want guidelines on data integrity? Well, there's one issued by the World Health Organization. The Pharmaceutical Inspection Cooperation Scheme, which is 50 countries, has a guideline, and it's identical word for the European Medical Agency. The British have come out with a great one, and FDA has come out with a guideline-ish. It doesn't exactly tell you what exactly to be done and how. If you really want to know what to do, read the British one. It's really the word for word tells you no nonsense what to do. So I'll give you that reference. All you have to do is Google MHRA Data Integrity Guideline. You get it. It's free. So realize that if your data is not accurate, if we can't trust it, it may as well not exist. Why do we bother having it? It's a lot of work to create it. So let's talk about what is data integrity. It's more than you may believe. It's the extent to which data is complete, consistent, and accurate throughout the data lifecycle, from the initial generation through recording and processing, including transformation of the data from manual to computer, from computer to another computer, to a backup, to a restore. Does it all hang together? Many companies I go to, I say, have you checked that the restore function works? You back up the data, great, but how do we know the file wasn't corrupted during the backup? And they say, no. Well, I say, well, let's do it now. Humor me. Let's try and restore the data now and come back at lunchtime and show me the restored data matches the original data. Lunchtime comes and goes, and they say, well, we're still trying to do it. Well, come on, it should be just a press of a button. Right through retention, archiving, retrieval, and finally destruction. Yes, eventually you will destroy the data. 10, 20 years from now, do you still need to keep the data? Probably not. So data sits in the middle of three circles. It's like a Venn diagram. Confidentiality, you don't want your data getting out to other people. Integrity, can we rely on the data? Is it integral? And is it available to review? That availability is often a big problem. The key to data integrity is what is called ALCOA. Everybody familiar with the term ALCOA? Aluminium Corporation of America, ALCOA. That's their logo. Just remember ALCOA. No, I don't have shares in ALCOA. And it's the key to data integrity. So what is this ALCOA? It's an acronym for 5 things. The A is attributable. You clearly know who recorded the data or who performed the activity. It's been signed and it's been dated, and you know who wrote the document and when they did it. Last year I was in India at an API company, and the batch records are in English. Nice, I can read it. And I'm looking at the batch record. The production cycle, the processing cycle, the reaction time is 48 hours at a certain temperature and pressure and rotation. And I'm looking at 48 hours worth of data, and it's all written with the same slope of the handwriting, the same color ink, and it's all exactly written down the middle of the column. What would you think to yourself? Is this written by the person who did the job when they did the job? Probably not. So I said to the QA director next to me, I said, you know, I don't believe that the actual operator wrote these details, because 48 hours is 6 shifts, each of 6 hours, and you can have 6 types of handwriting, but it's all one type of handwriting. And he goes, Mr. Anisfeld, you are totally correct. I said, then why doesn't the operator do it? And they said, well, the operator can't read or write. I said, okay, I can understand that. They don't read and write English. Why don't you write it in the local language, Marathi? This was outside Mumbai. Marathi. And he says, no, Mr. Anisfeld, you don't understand what I'm saying. The local operator can't read or write anything. Totally illiterate in any language. So we have to have the supervisors come in afterwards and write down what we think will happen. So there's your first basic problem of data integrity. Legible. It must be possible to read or interpret the data after it's recorded. It must be permanent. That means no pencils. No unexplained hieroglyphics or symbols or codes. And if it's corrected, it has to be done properly. You know, the proper way, one line through, signature date, new number. Or if in Japan, 2 lines through, because Japan is different. No, 2 lines. If 1 line through in Japan, it means that not whatever it is, and 2 lines through means it's an error. Has to be contemporaneous. The data has to be recorded at the time it was generated in close proximity to the location where the data is generated. So I went to one company where the balances are 3 rooms away down the corridor, and they go along to do the weighing, and they remember what the weighing is, they come back 3 rooms, they write it down. Not exactly the best practice. Original. The data has to be preserved in an unaltered state. If not, you have to explain why not, and you have to certify copies of the data. In France, it is terrible. There is a cultural thing there. Don't ask me why it is, but it's a cultural thing. You want the data in reports to be neat and typed and legible. So they do that. They take the original data, they copy it into the typist, and she types it up all neatly and legible, and then they throw away the original. Don't ask me why. I see that even this year I saw that. And lastly, it has to be accurate. It has to correctly reflect the action or the observation made. The data has to be checked where necessary, and modifications have to be explained if they are not evident. So, the data has to be checked where necessary. That doesn't mean every piece of data has to be checked. There are what we call critical data elements and non-critical data elements. So if I'm recording your training, there are critical elements of the training. What was the topic? Who gave it? When was it given? What is not critical is the exact time it started to the second and the exact time it finished to the second. So that's critical, non-critical. And there are many documents we have in our industry that really are not critical and don't need a second signature. I go some places where everything has a second signature. And the amount of manpower that takes and the amount of checking and rechecking is incredible. So first look at your data and say what is critical and what is not critical. You have to have a system to make sure you have data integrity. You can't just say, well, of course we are. Jim wrote it. Jim, we trust Jim. He's been here for 20 years. If he says he wrote it on Wednesday, he wrote it on Wednesday. That is a German attitude, but it's not acceptable. Because in Germany, people work at the same company for years and years and years. And after 20 years of working with somebody, you still don't know his first name. It's Herr Schmidt. So you need to have a system and process designed to encourage compliance with the principles of data integrity. You need to consider ease of access, usability, and location when ensuring proper controls. For example, now this slide is totally stolen by me from the MHRA Data Integrity Guidelines. I make no claim to have written it, so when you get to the guideline, you'll see this exactly again. You need to record times that events happen if you are critical for time. I went to a company in Pittsburgh recently, and every room I went to showed a different time. Not off by 1 minute or 2 minutes. One room said 2:30, another one said 10 minutes past 11. I mean, no synchronization whatsoever. This is Pittsburgh. So you have to have access to clocks, and they should be master-slave synchronized. One master clock and all the others mirror it. And it should, ideally, be synced to a time clock. I buy these atomic clock. I have one in my bedroom. It's every hour on the hour, some signal goes to a satellite, and it's always correct, as is my watch. Accessibility to batch records, and I would also add testing records at locations where the activity takes place so that ad hoc data recording and later transcription to official records is not necessary. Went to a place recently where the weighing records was actually original, was written on a paper towel. And then they took the paper towel and took it back to the lab because the weighing was 3 rooms down. And I said, well, where's the original data? Because I saw them do it on paper towel over there, but here there's no paper towels. And well, no, we transcribed. Well, the best solution to that is either take the lab book with you or take the paper towel, cut it out, and stick it in the lab book. I mean, one or the other, but I want the original data. Control over blank paper templates for data recording. Many places you go to, They spilled some acid over the paper in the data sheet, go back to the lab, photocopy another data sheet and bring it in. Well, how do we know the original data was the real data and what's been copied now on the new one? FDA doesn't like that at all. Abbott paid a fine of around $250,000 for that about 15 years ago. It was a real big issue. Access rights preventing data amendments. I would expect that the minimum there is an SOP that defines who can access data, who can read data, probably anybody, who can write new data, only authorized, validated analysts or trained analysts, who can edit data, probably only 1 or 2 people under very strict controls, and who can delete data, even more restrictive controls. But these things need to be defined in SOPs. You need to have audit trails. Audit trails need to be automatically generated. You can't have a little logbook saying, well, I changed this and that, and that's it. The system itself has to have audit trails, and these audit trails need to be reviewed. And FDA's latest thinking is, when you do an HPLC chromatogram, you print out the run sheet, you print out the chromatograms, and then you also print out the audit trail for that day or that operator's work. And it needs to be reviewed as part of the batch record review. Automated data capture and printers attached to the equipment is encouraged. So you don't have to write numbers down, just take a printout. It's encouraged. It's not a must, but it's encouraged. And printers obviously have to be close to where the work is being done. If you're checking data, you also have to have access to the raw data. So when QA does the batch record review and gets the QC lab, it's not sufficient to get just a certificate of analysis from the lab. They need to get the raw data with all the chromatograms, without all the printouts, so that the QA can do a second-person check or a third-person check in some companies. You need to control the physical parameters of time, space, and equipment to perform the tasks to be done as required. Many places don't have room for printers, don't have room for computer input, so they transfer the data by hand, what we call sneakerware. They take a disk or they move it somewhere around. You've got to have enough space to do these things. And as I said before, staff checking the activities need to have the raw data. This is a British thing that allows scribes to record activity on behalf of somebody else under exceptional circumstances. A different company in India, I saw the worker making tablets, and the guy's doing his work, and standing just inside the door of the room is the supervisor with a checklist, the batch record, writing up all the data. Because can't read, illegibility. Guy's just not able. So the British allow containment trace recording of compromises the product activity to accommodate cultural or staff literacy language and activities performed by an operator but witnessed and recorded by the supervisor. The FDA doesn't allow that. The British do. In both situations, the supervisor recording should be contemporaneous, and it goes on. Now, there are different data record formats. It depends on the complexity of what's going on. We can have simple activities all the way through to complex activities. Simple activities may not require software at all, and a printout could represent the original data. For example, I'm doing a weighing. I do the weighing, I get a printout from the printer. There's no data saved in the weighing balance. There's no linkage to an LIM system. All I do is I weigh it, here's the printout. That's a simple system. All the way to the most complex, which has complex software, and the printout itself doesn't represent the original data. The original data is captured in the hard disk inside the computer. I don't know if you're aware, every time you make a photocopy on your photocopy machine, big one downstairs in the hallway, there's a hard disk in there, and it keeps a copy of what you copied. Police could go in there 10 years from now and see exactly what's been copied on that machine. So that's the original data. The printout is a facsimile. So we have no software all the way through to complex software. And if you put all your pieces of equipment on this scheme, a pH meter has no software, the printout is what you get, that's it. All the way through to enterprise resource planning, LIM systems, even Kappa systems. The further you get, the more complex the data, the more you have to worry about data integrity. Can we trust, can we rely on the data? My slides, by the way, have a series of builds on them. And when you print out the handout, the trouble is it doesn't always print all the series of builds. I'm more than happy if you give me your business card, I can send you the original of the presentation, and then you can see the whole thing. All right? So, documentation requirements for data integrity when you do chromatography work. I would expect to see the print run chart, the sample sequence, what you injected, your blanks, your standards, your calculation of system suitability, your actual runs, your system suitability again. So, print the system suitability from the start and the end, print all the chromatograms, print all the calculations, and then print the audit trail for all work by that analyst for that day. That's nowadays what is expected to be the minimum for QA to review and for the QC lab manager to review the data. And the FDA is spending a lot of time on the audit trail. There is an inspector, FDA inspector by the name of Peter Baker, who is originally a chemist and is a whiz on this stuff. And I've suffered through 2 of his inspections, and he knows HPLCs much better than most of you in the lab do. And he can do a number on this. He got so bad that he caused 3 years ago, 17 Indian pharmaceutical companies to get warning letters. And the result of that was that the Indian Pharmaceutical Association asked the government not to renew his visa. And he got kicked out of India, really, seriously. He spent the next year at FDA headquarters teaching other FDA inspectors exactly what he knew. So now we have Peter Baker and lots of mini Peter Bakers. And Peter Baker then came to China. And I suffered through his second audit. I suffered through one in India, I suffered through another one in China. And again, he found things that we had no idea what he was even looking for. And we got another warning letter on that. He's now been kicked out of China as well. I'm not sure where he is now, but he really knows his data integrity. We have to worry about data governance. How do we address who owns the data throughout the life cycle, considering the design, operation, and monitoring of the systems to comply with the principles of data integrity over intentional and unintentional changes of information? How do we control this? Who thinks about it? So it includes staff training in the importance of data integrity principles, the creation of a work environment that enables the visibility of errors. When you make an error, it should show up. My wife recently had a blood test and her hemoglobin level went down to 6.9. And instead of just reporting the result, overlaid over the result was the word panic, panic, to catch the nurse's attention, the doctor's attention. Because when your hemoglobin goes down to that level, you can die next. 2 more drops and you're dead. So they all came running like crazy. You have to have a blood transfusion right now. So that's how you get people's attention. The same with the errors, the visibility of errors. Senior management is responsible to implement the systems and procedures to minimize the potential risk to data integrity and identify the residual risk using risk management techniques explained in the risk management ICH guideline. And contract givers, that's you, using an outside lab or an outside testing facility, have to ensure that data ownership, governance, and accessibility are included in a contract and technical agreement. It should also govern data governance as part of your vendor assurance program. So part of your audits now of vendors is how do they control their data? How do you know that their data has integrity? And raw data has to permit the full reconstruction of the activities resulting in the generation of the data. In the case of basic electronic equipment which does not store data or provides only a printed output, the printout constitutes the raw material. For HPLCs, GCs, UV, the printout is not the raw material, no matter what your SOP says. Because I've been to places where it says, in our facility, we consider the printout to be the raw data. That's fine for you, that's not fine for the authorities. The raw data is the first capture point. Are you all familiar with the term metadata? Metadata is a really important issue. Some people are always confused by this. If you go home and your wife is on the telephone, you can hear the discussion from her side of it, or his side of it. Your spouse is on the phone. And you know the conversation is going on, and you can hear one side of the conversation. You have no idea who they're speaking to. A month later, when you get your phone bill, you'll get a list of the date, who was called, the time of the call, and the duration of the call. That is the metadata giving context to the one-sided conversation you heard a month ago. So the conversation itself is the data. The metadata gives you the background to it. Metadata without the data is useless. Data without the metadata is useless. So you need to make sure that you keep both. So when you have a chromatogram, you can see the printout, but the metadata is all the who did the assay, what time they did the assay, what other assays were done. That's all the metadata, and that's what needs to be seen in the audit trail. So the data describes the structure, the interrelationships, and other characteristics. It's an integral part of the original record, and without the metadata, the data has no meaning. You need to make sure of the accuracy, completeness, and content of the meaning of the data and the metadata throughout the data lifecycle. So if Regis is making an API, and you do, and your typical expiration date is what, 3 years? Let's say 3 years. Then you need to keep the data for how long? Not 3 years. Because your API is going into somebody else's tablets, and they have a 4-year expiration date, and the GMP says you keep data for the expiration date plus 1 year or 2 years in Europe. so that your customer has 4 years plus say 1, that's 5, plus your 3 is 8, and then your lawyers will say keep it forever. But you have to think about the usage and the data retention time. Okay? You need to worry about destruction of the data, and you need to consider the criticality and applicable legislative retention requirements. Archiving data should be in place for long-term retention of relevant data in compliance with legislation. I became the QA manager of a company, and I was looking at all our data. We had nice computers which at that time had 3.5-inch floppy disks. I inherited some 11-inch disks, the original Wang disks. Couldn't read them. Had no way of knowing what the data said. That's one of the problems we have today. CD-ROMs as a data meter storage is old hat. It's going out the way. You keep your data on a cloud. Where's the cloud? Anyone know where the cloud is? Who controls the cloud? How do you know what's happening to your data? All these things come up. Cloud computing. You like the clouds? It took me a long time to find a picture of clouds. All right. Here's a big issue because everybody's going to the cloud, both for downloading software and for keeping your data. We have software providers who have SAS, ISS, software as a service, infrastructure as a service. If you want to buy Microsoft Word today, you probably can't buy it as a disk. You can only rent it for them and have to pay a fee every year. They're keeping it as a service. You rent the service. Same with Adobe. When you're trying to print out documents, you can't buy the disk anymore. I still use version 9 because it's on the disk that I've got. Otherwise, if I went to today's version 13, every year I've got to pay $130. To me, that's insane, but that's how they make money. So where you use a cloud or virtual services, you have to pay attention to understand what is being provided, who owns it, how you retrieve it, how it's retained, and its security. The physical location where the data is held, including the impact of any laws applicable to that geographic location, should be considered. Has anybody heard of the Svalbard Islands in northern Arctic Ocean? Svalbard. It's a little set of islands owned by Norway. And it is year-round average temperature 30 degrees. It is cold. And these server farms, which have all these computerization, get very, very hot. So they are looking for places where they can cool it down. Ah, Svalbard. And we now have several data farms up in Svalbard. Who owns that data? Well, the company you hire from. But what is the legislative rules for that data? Norway? Well, that depends on which part of Svalbard you are, because half of Svalbard is Russian. So you're going to go with the laws of Russia to keep your data? And data hacking? I mean, we've heard that recently. Or is it going to be in the Norway? But have you even thought about this? Responsibility of the contract giver or acceptor, and remember the cloud is a contract acceptor. You're going to tell them store my data, has to be defined in a technical agreement, and if you want to go audit it, anybody want to go to Svalbard? It's difficult to get to, by the way. You need to have timely access to the data, including the metadata and audit trails, and you need to have kept by the data owner and the national competent authorities on request. You should be able to go there with reasonable advance notice. Hey, I want to come and audit your facilities for GMP compliance, because this is part of GMP, and I want to come next November. Oh, you can't come in November. Why not? Well, there's no plane and no boat. Oh. So you've got to think about those sort of things. Contracts with providers define the responsibilities for archiving, continued readability of the data throughout the retention period, and appropriate arrangements exist for the restoration of the software or the season as per its original interactive validated state. Many people rent software these days. I just mentioned Word. They say the advantage of renting software is we are constantly updating it. So you never have an old version. And then you say, well, what about constantly validating your updates? And you get silence. Because if you're buying a validated software, great, you can use it. But if they update it and don't even tell you it's automatic, we do it every day, every night. And then they don't tell you it's validated, now you get into trouble when FDA shows up. So this is a big issue. And business continuity arrangements should include it in the contract and tested, supposing your cloud provider in Svalbard goes out of business. Or there is an earthquake, because that is an earthquake zone, and the whole of the island goes. Now what do? Do you have backup plans? So this data integrity business, especially as more and more people are going in the cloud, becomes more and more difficult. You can learn a lot by looking at warning letters from different agencies. The FDA has warning letters. The European Medicines Agency has warning letters. and it's very easy to find them. Just go European Medicines Agency. They don't call it warning letters, they call it, there's another word for it, it'll come back to me, but there's another word besides warning letters. Oh, certificate of compliance. Just type in that word and you'll get that. The United Nations also has one, by the way. Let me give you some examples. Now, I mentioned the Japanese problem today of the cars and steel. Here's another recent one from last month. Shandong Vianor in China. Firm failed to ensure that lab records included complete data. Your management acknowledged falsifying analytical test results that were used to support your release of something to the United States. Not good, huh? And then your analysts revealed that the so-and-so lot was subpotent. However, the certificate analysis provided showed it was within spec. When questioned about why the C of A reported passing results, even though the batch actually failed, your quality unit manager stated, "I made a mistake." My question is, where's QA? Because that was the lab manager. Where was QA? Where was their audits? Or more importantly, where's the audits that should have been happening from their clients? Because they're making API for American customers. What happened to their audits? This is a real interesting one from a company called Wockhardt in India. Wockhardt is a huge, huge Indian hospital group. The same here as we have North Shore Connect and we have the other chains here in the States. Wockhardt has about 200 hospitals. And they decided that really they should vertically integrate in every way possible. So they bought the makers of sheets so they could get all the sheets at a cheap rate into the hospitals. And then they said, we can do the same with drugs. And they started up doing drug manufacture. Only trouble was they didn't have much idea about GMP and drug manufacture in general. So they've had repeatedly warning letters. And this one from December, while reviewing gas chromatography data on instrument so-and-so, our investigator found unreported results, including OOS test results for raw materials. You didn't investigate or explain why you failed to investigate. Also found you reported only 2 of 3 chromatographic injections during in-process sample testing for residual solvent. You didn't explain why you excluded the 3rd injection. Not good. And your response indicates you have initiated a retrospective review of data over a multi-year period, but your response is inadequate because it does not explain the depth of your electronic data review. So you begin to see how FDA's expectation on data integrity is getting tougher and tougher. Let's go to a place that is about, 2 miles from here? Probably? 1 mile from here. Morton Grove Pharmaceuticals. Now, Morton Grove has a very interesting history. Because over the last 20 years, it's gone through successive series of ownerships and changing from investment groups to pharmaceutical groups to investment group, and now to a pharmaceutical ownership. Morton Grove Pharmaceutical always had the same name in the same building. It is now owned by Wockhardt of India. The same Wockhardt of the previous slide. And your firm hasn't got proper controls over computer systems. Investigators observe that IT staff in your facility share the usernames and passwords to access your electronic data storage system. Your IT staff can delete or change directories and files without telling anybody. That is a major basic data integrity issue. Really serious issue. It could be that their IT group here, a mile from here, takes directions straight from the IT group in India. Could be. Who knows? All I know is that Wockhardt is not doing well with data integrity anywhere in the world. It also goes on, your failed lab to ensure that lab records include complete data. When our investigator reviewed your investigation of the above failure results, we found your investigation assigned the cause of the failures to analyst error if repeat tests delivered passing results. The original results were invalidated without scientific justification under the protocol, and only retest results were reported. You can't do that. That comes back to your basic kappa investigations. Your investigations have to have scientific rationale and validity before you say, these results are lab error, analyst error. In fact, companies that attribute more than 10% of all their problems with investigations to analysts are probably not doing a good job in an investigation because it's real quick and easy to, blame the analyst and move on. So that's a huge issue there. Japanese company earlier this year, the audit trail showed you performed this testing in duplicate. The audit trail indicated you conducted the sequence analyzing impurities of that lot. The audit trail showed a new sequence was started 24 hours after the first sequence. None of the 19 chromatograms generated in the first sequence were maintained and available for review. So, okay, I don't have the original data. I don't know why you got rid of it, what was wrong with it. So how do I know I can trust the second set of data? That's all comes out from looking at the audit trail. And on the second set of chromatograms, you could not provide any rationale for not maintaining the original data, and you fail to document the scientific justification for repeating the analysis. And again, it goes on, you don't mention electronic data for your ultraviolet visible spectrophotometer, and you don't have an audit trail. And in addition, you revise the procedure, called Procedure on Testing Records. All the data generated from any analytical device should be kept as records. However, your response is inadequate. You haven't conducted a retrospective review to determine how your failure to maintain records affects the quality of drugs previously made. So nowadays, if FDA comes up with a data integrity problem, it's not just one batch today that's the problem. They now want you to go back and look at all the previous batches you made to make sure this data integrity problem doesn't affect all of them. And I've had a client where he's had to go back through 3 years worth of data for a specific product because that's the shelf life on the market. And the FDA says, well, we find a problem in today's analysis. How do we know the last 3 years worth of data is okay? Can you imagine the workload to do that? It's unreal. So all this comes back to data integrity. I'm only trying to give you an introduction. I've got a one-day seminar on this stuff. So I hope I've given you some thoughts, some ideas. And if there's a big black cloud hanging over the room, good. But remember, data integrity depends on you. It's how you work within the framework of your company. And I thank you for your attention. If there's any questions, please, now's the time. I apologize. I rushed a bit because I knew we were at least half an hour late. So if there's any questions, please, anything. Yes, sir.
You mentioned recording the time.
Yes.
So when you are here in more in one place, I see this is pretty easy to implement. But if you work for a company who do service, and my client is sometime in Chicago, sometime in New York, and I don't change my computer clock, now I'm printing my printout as an hour difference compared to each time I say started the thing and then look at the clock, but my printout is like an hour off every time.
There's a solution to that, an easy solution. I have a client who makes product in America, but one of their tests is so super specialized specific, the equipment to do it is based in Germany. And so they sent the sample over to Germany to do it. So now how do we synchronize all the clocks? Have you heard of Universal Coordinated Time, GMT? That company, all of their clocks in every facility everywhere worldwide runs on GMT or UTC. That's the way you get out.
Sort of a trending issue for you. Where do you see the end game trending to this? I mean, it seems like it's still divergent in a lot of respects in terms of complexity.
I guess there is no end to the complexity and the no, really. Every somebody comes up with a new system, a new thing to replace the cloud, then we're going to have to figure out everything about that. It's just an ongoing thing. It's like counterfeit drugs. How do you ever get ahead of the counterfeiters? You don't. You have to always react. It's the same with this. How do you get ahead of it? You can't, because new technology, new ways of working, you're always going on. For me as a consultant, it's great. FDA comes out with new regulations, I get more business. For you guys who work with it, it's a pain in the neck. That's all I can answer. Sorry, John. Merci, Nicola. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm wondering if you see a general backsliding in this. In my experience, it seems like as there's pressure to do things faster and faster, this is the stuff that slips. And so maybe, is this becoming more of a problem? That's why FDA is looking at it, because it's a common thing. People are getting sloppy in it, maybe?
Interesting. Why is FDA looking at people who are getting sloppy? The more FDA concentrates on things like validation, things like data integrity, the more we're noticing in the industry, basic GMPs are just dropping away. People don't focus on that. So things like forgetting to sign a batch record. Well, you should have gone automatic, so it's automatically done. So yes, there is this huge problem. As soon as FDA picks a new topic to concentrate on, everybody runs to worry about that, and then other stuff gets left behind. It's just the way it is. Yes, please.
So what's the cure for cloud storage? Do you have a disk farm somewhere in a file cabinet of your own? That's
The cure for cloud storage requires you to have an agreement with a mythical company somewhere, who knows. The cure is the old-fashioned cure. Have a backup that's stored off-site. You control the data. You know where it is. You know anything about it. Cost effectiveness? I don't know. But I'm saying that's the cure. I don't trust the cloud. I keep nothing on the cloud. Even my backups are always onto a local drive, kept in another building. Yes, please.
Yeah, in a parallel world of patent laws have changed and times and dates and proofs, time of invention is now different. When you went to commercialization, you have to prove that you did or did not have a product for commercialization. How does these approaches to data integrity reflect upon patent integrity?
I'll be honest, I don't deal with intellectual property, so I don't even know how to answer your question. I'm sorry. I know what I'm an expert in, and I know what I'm not, and I stay away from what I'm not. Sorry. Yes, please.
Yeah, you mentioned audit trail review. In the example you gave was in the laboratory. Do you see that extending beyond the laboratory for all computer systems?
I've seen it with process computers where in the production area you can change the parameters of the production. There's an audit trail there, and you review that as part of the batch record review to make sure that the new inputted data. If, for example, it says stir at a temperature of 90 to 110, and they can change that depending on whatever. And so you want to make sure that the guy changed it to something correct. So yes, I want to see the audit trail.
And the audit trail will be printed out in part of
As part of the printout of temperatures and times, and also be the audit trail. So that's becoming common.
And then another question, you mentioned also to incorporate this into like quality agreements or technical agreements. Are you seeing language like that going into
Oh yes,
quality agreements?
oh yes, absolutely. And it gets very complicated when the technical agreement includes that your supplier, let's say a contract lab, is using the cloud for its storages. Then it gets very complicated. But yes, I am seeing it in agreements. Last chance? Going once? If you have any questions in the future, on the back slide is my email address. Don't try and phone me, I'm never there. But send me an email and I'll get you an answer within 24 hours. Thank you, everybody.